Fans of the Horus Heresy, thank you very much for joining me for a rules and analysis review. And the title of this piece is called The Balance of Heresy, Evolution of Army Balance, Horus Heresy Book 1, Betrayal to Present, or alternatively, How the Legions Were Balanced versus a Mechanicum. So, the purpose of this video is, I suppose it's a bit of a retrospective view as to how the actual tabletop balance has developed between the two main protagonists in the Horus Heresy game. So obviously when I say the two main protagonists in terms of different armies, clearly there are many flavours of Space Marine Legion to choose from. But in terms of truly different forces, the Mechanicum and the Space Marine Legion are the two most significant combatants. Both armies trace their histories back to Book 1 Betrayal, and both have continually evolved over the course of the Horus Heresy books. And it is interesting that the Mechanicum have become such a significant part of the Horus Heresy game series, given that it is predominantly, at first glance anyway, a civil war mainly involving the Marine Legions. However, it was fascinating to actually have the Mechanicum, or the Adeptus Mechanicus as they're referred to in the 40k setting, introduced into games and to get an extensive miniature range. And we could probably imagine it was the success of the Mechanicum in the Horus Heresy that led to the appearance of the Skitarii and the Cult Mechanicus in Warhammer 40,000. So this is a detailed analysis, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to present the points values for significant units as they were presented in the early part of the Horus Heresy rule set. So I see that as being books 1 to 4, 1 to 5 really, and then how those values were significantly rebalanced by the time book 6 came out, and also the Mechanicum Tagmata army list and the second edition of the Legions Astartes Age of Darkness army list appeared. And the consequence of this is to shift the balance of the game balance towards the Marine players, and there's a clear recognition within the points that the early costings of the Marines were both too high and the Mechanicum was too low. So, anyway, let's get into this. Right, so the first part, there's 3 slides to this video, and the first slide is going to look at base squad costs between the two positions. So I've put base squad cost version 1 compared to version 2. So version 1, I've said Horus Heresy books 1 to 5 and Crusade Legion Army book list version 1, and then version 2 I consider to be Horus Heresy book 6, Crusade Legion Army list version 2, and Tagmata list book 1. When I say Crusade Legion version 2, it was the edition that was introduced by that limited edition black-bound book and is now available as a normal red book. So that's what I mean by version 2 of the Marine list. So here we have a list of all units who saw a change in points values between version 1 and version 2. And what we can see is that the top section are all the Legions Astartes units. If I just find my pen, that will help. So they're not listed in any particular order, well, they're alphabetically listed, but we have the unit name, the points cost in version 1, the points cost in version 2, and then the percentage change with 2 compared to 1, i.e. so a negative value in here shows a reduction in cost, a positive value shows an increase in cost, and I've colour-coded the reductions in value in green. So just to keep it fairly visually simple. And then on the bottom half of the table, I've got the corresponding data for the Tagmata Omnissiah. So this is from the Mechanicum list. So what do we see? Well, the first obvious thing to spot is a large number of marine units reduced in cost between version 1 and version 2. So we have a couple of increases to start with: an Amberless Dreadclaw drop pod, the Falchion super heavy tank destroyer modest points increased, the Phobos and Proteus land raiders reduced by 10%, but the big changes are when you get into the infantry. So Legion Assault Squad, 30% reduction in points, 250 down to 175. Breacher Squad, 225 down to 200. Command Squad, 100 down to 75. Javelin Attack Squadron, 75 down to 55. And so on, and you can see it all the way through. And some vehicles have seen a reduction in cost, but nearly every single marine unit had its base costs reduced by at least 10%, and as much as 30% in the case of the Assault Squad. So the effect of the version 2 army list was to dramatically reduce the cost of Space Marine forces. Now, if we apply the same thought process to the Mechanicum, we see the opposite is the case. There is a general increase in points cost in version 2. So first of all, as a character, so Archmagos in our Satariel had a modest points increase. That's not particularly significant. Here's a big one. So the Castellax Battle Automata, which is a true staple of the Mechanicum list, increased from 85 to 105 points, so 24% points increase. So a lot of Tagmata lists will have 4 Castellax in them. So that is an increase of 80 points on pretty much most lists. And if you're playing Legio Cybernetica, that could be even more. And bear in mind, Legio Cybernetica, you have to take 4 Castellax, if I remember rightly. The Magos Dominus saw an increase in points, a key support unit to Castellax and other robots. The Myrmidon Destructors, a 13% increase. Thanatars saw a modest increase of 4%. And the Ursarax cohort, so these are the jump infantry version of the Talax combat cyborgs, saw an increase of 13%. There was one notable reduction, which was the Vorax class battle automata. So these are like the fast, light attack robots, and they were reduced by 13% from 75 to 65. But so a big shift in the balance of points. General increases to the Mechanicum, but lots and lots of reductions to the Legion's Astartes list. So let's move to the second page of this analysis. And in the second page, I'm going to consider how additional troops changed in value. So we have the same, exactly the same format of table here. However, this time I'm looking at additional troops costs. So what do we see? Firstly, the Assault Squad. So remembering the Assault Squad had a minus 30% on the base cost. They also saw a reduction of 13% on their additional troops. So Assault Squads got much, much cheaper overall, indicating they were clearly overvalued in the first cut of the rules. Breacher Squad extra troops saw an increase. So Breacher Squads got more cheaper to buy, but then more expensive to buy extra troops for, which makes sense because they had a ridiculous imbalance in cost. So to start with Breacher Marines, it was, I think, the most expensive Marine squad, or nearly, at 225 for 10, but yet they had incredibly cheap additional troops at a mere 10 points, which means the cost of the squad was ridiculously front-loaded. The Legion Command Squad, the additional troops called the Chosen were reduced from 20 to 15 points, and Legion Seekers saw an increase from 15 to 20 points. So the Seeker Squad sees a similar pattern to the Breachers. This basic squad was reduced in cost, but the additional troops got more expensive. Looking to the Mechanicum, there were less changes there. So firstly, Myrmidon Destructors increased from 35 to 40 points for extra troops, and the Ursarax increased from 45 to 50. So increases there that were consistent with the basic squad costs. So I hope, so what I take from that is to say that between what I've called version 1 and version 2 rules, a significant rebalancing of the Mechanicum and Space Marine lists occurred, which must be in response to playtesting from sort of the first wave of the Horus Heresy book sales. And when we go from here to here, Space Marines were clearly overvalued, and the Mechanicum were undervalued. And I think if you played Mechanicum versus Marines in that early phase of the game, that was certainly my experience, that the Mechanicum was a very powerful force, and at times could be downright unpleasant to fight. And there are certain elements of the Mechanicum force, such as Myrmidon Destructors equipped with irradiation engines, which got quite contentious in my gaming group, to the point that I certainly stopped using them. Yeah, so there's the kind of summary of what the points are like. So let's now think about this in terms of a real world, well, I say real world example, an actual example. So what I've done here is I've just summarised the impact of those points changes on 2 example lists. And these example lists is a list that my friend used to commonly play with, so 2,000 point list, and a list that I commonly played with as well. So these were 2 forces that we frequently matched off against one another with. And what I've done is I've shown the impact of the points changes on the elements in that force. So this is not a complete force list for either side. However, it does list all of the units which saw a change in value between version 1 and version 2. And what this is illustrating is the degree of balance change that occurred between those 2 lists. So you can see that elements changed in value both ways for both lists. So for the Marines, Tactical Marines, Assault Marines, Land Raider Proteus all saw a reduction in value, whereas the Spartan assault tank and the Sakaran heavy battle tank both saw an increase in points. However, when you take the net position, this 2,000 point Marine army saw a 115 point reduction between version 1 and version 2. Conversely, the Mechanicum force generally sees increases in points. So again, remember this is just looking. This is looking at the base cost, if I remember rightly. So my Magos Dominus got more expensive, my 4 Castellarchs got more expensive, my 3 Varrocs got a bit cheaper, Thanatars went up in cost, and my Myrmidon Destructors also increased in cost as well. In the case of the Myrmidon Destructors, I factored in the increase in cost of their irradiation engines that I used to field them with as well, because it was had such a significant impact. So so in the case of the Mechanicum, my Mechanicum list, it became 125 points more expensive in version 2 compared to version 1. So what does that mean in terms of the actual balance of those games we were playing in version 1? Well, if you take the absolute difference between those 2 variances, there's a differential of 240 points, i.e. In version 1, that Legion list was outpointed by the Mechanicum to the degree of 240 points, which is around 12% of a 2,000 point force. So when I now look back on it and think about our earlier games in the version 1, when I was fielding this force and my friend was fielding his Legion force, I can now see why the Mechanicum were so hard to fight and did triumph so often. And the reason for that was the points were not properly balanced in the first iteration. Now, that's hindsight is a wonderful thing. So I guess this is not to criticise the game designer, because creating a new army, and particularly in a iterative fashion, has happened whereby units were introduced a few at a time, particularly on the Mechanicum side, and also very new units, establishing the balance of those troops is difficult. But certainly in the game as it exists now, the Space Marines have been significantly rebalanced against the Mechanicum force. So I guess interesting bit of reflection there on the development of the Horus Heresy tabletop game thus far, and the two protagonists in the form of a Legion and the Mechanicum. I guess, perhaps if you're one of those Legion players who fought Mechanicum and found it hard to win early on, maybe this makes some sense of that. And if you were Mechanicum, perhaps just something to reflect on with regards to all those victories you earned against the Marines, and be perhaps a humble victor when looking back on those wins. And I suppose another thing is it's an encouraging sign in a general sense that the game's been designed and a lot of feedback must have been given and retrospect considered for the early game, and a lot of change has been made to improve the balance of these two main forces. So anyway, I hope you found that interesting. Little bit of a detailed analysis there. Let me know what you think. Were you a Mechanicum player who swept all before you, or were you a Space Marine Legion force who could never beat the servants of the Omnissiah? Thank you very much for listening. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.